Hello, everyone. I am Jessica, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Big Book Workshop of Joe and Charlie. We as leaders do not consider ourselves to be the gurus of the Big Book of AA. We do not consider ourselves to be experts in anything at all. For those who care to, please join me in a moment of silence to remember why we are here and for the alcoholic who still suffers. And please join me in the workshop prayer. God, set aside everything I think I know about you, AA, myself, and my disease for an open mind and a new experience. Let me be honest and thorough. Amen. For the first couple of weeks, we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves in order to get to know one another. I'm Jessica, I'm an alcoholic, but obviously I am recording again alone this week, so we will not be doing that. But the purpose of this workshop is to experience the recovery process as outlined in the Big Book of AA, either for the first time or again, so that we may better carry out and understand our primary purpose, which is to stay sober and carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic. We are here to talk about recovery only and go through the 12-step process as outlined in the Big Book of AA. This is not an emotional or intellectual exercise. This is a spiritual exercise so that we can all recover and experience the recovery process as we read it together. It is recommended that anything you hear here that cannot be reconciled in the Big Book, the 12 and 12, or any AA-approved literature simply be ignored. This is a not crosstalk workshop. So we are finally into a new week. We are in week 14, which is chapter 6 in the Big Book. This is step 5. This is into action. We've been talking about a lot of how it works with chapter 5. What is that? Chapter 4, chapter 5? I don't even know. Let me verify that. I should know this for how many weeks we're in it. Okay, chapter 5. But we've done quite, I think, 7 sessions on how it works. So into action is a great start. So it wants us to read page 72. In the Big Book, paragraph 1. Oh, I did leave off there. Okay. So paragraph 1, having made our personal inventory, which was our step 4, what should we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We've admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now, these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. That is the 5th step of the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So note that in this step, it says the exact nature of our wrongs. But here in the narrative, and for those following along, we're on page 144 in our workshop workbook. Billy uses the word defects in step 5. And later on in step 6, he uses, in quote, all the things we admitted are objectionable. In step 7, instead of using shortcomings, he uses defects of character. So he uses those words in the steps, but here in the narrative, it was not concerned with where the words fall. People always ask Bill, what's the difference with a wrong, a defect, a shortcoming? Bill said it doesn't make any difference what you call them. They all are the same. So we learned that Bill likes to use different language to relate to everybody. So now continuing on page 72, paragraph 2, up to the first paragraph of page 73. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing defects with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting things to ourselves, but there is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it was necessary to go further. So we would be more reconciled discussing with others, with another person, when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience has turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, which means always or every, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. I think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning, their 4th step. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of those worst items in stocks. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought that they had humbled themselves. They had not learned enough of the humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense that we all find it necessary until they told someone else all in that's an italicized of their life story. Um, okay, so there is a statement which messes us up in the fourth step because we read all of your life story and then we went back again to write our life story. But as we have seen, 95 of our life percent of our life story doesn't really have anything to do with our drinking. What does have something to do with our drinking are resentments, fear, and harms done, which is what we've been going over. So if I'm listing all my resentments, I'm listing my entire life story as it pertains to resentment. If I'm listing my fears, I'm listing my entire life story as it appears pertains to fear. If I do the same thing with harms, I'm listing my life story as it as far as harms done. It is those things that really count. We've talked about this in previous weeks where, telling somebody else our entire life story or to ourselves does absolutely nothing. Like, we were there, we knew what happened. If we were blackout on drugs or alcohol, whatever it may be, I'm sure we knew what happened due to the consequences thereafter. So writing our life story doesn't matter, and it's not like we're gonna find anything. Why does my head shape look so weird with this weird background? That is so weird. Okay, sorry, I'm got off topic, but like it says, we're talking about resentments, fears, and harms done here. So continuing on page 73, paragraph 1, which we already read there, 2, paragraph 3. Okay. So, for some reason I boxed page 73, paragraph 1. So I'm going to go to those notes after in my study edition here. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he wants his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but his heart, he knows he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming in senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think somebody might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside of himself. He hopes that he'll never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We spend thousands of dollars for examinations, but we know a few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men who are honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have low opinion of alcoholics and their chance for recovery. So on the side I had some notes for paragraph page 73, paragraph 1. The word pride comes to mind. It's what I want others to think of me. There's ego, what I think of me. And both of these are manifestations of self. We're playing roles to get what we want. I am the actor trying to run the whole show, controlling others' thoughts. So we made an agreement in step 3 that I am not in charge. So trying to control the right action, not the result, is what we are looking to do. So now I'm going to take my inventory to another human being, someone that is not involved in my personal life, who can look at a thing from an outside view and help provide an objective and truthful picture of it. The human being will help me see these character defects that I need to get rid of. And I'm amazed how often my sponsor would change those things in my inventory. You could point out character defects that I was unable to see, and it helped me truthfully look at me. I know in step 5, the confession is good for the soul. It helps to share these resentments, fears, and harms done with someone. However, the real purpose of step 5 is to learn that I can learn about myself and to truthfully see those things that I need to work on and change them in the future. Left to my own resources, I simply cannot do that. And it wants us to read the last paragraph and into the paragraph 2 on the next page. So we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Righteously and naturally, we think well before we choose a person or persons whom take this intimate and confidential step. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination requires confession. Stand, of course, will want to go properly appointed authority whose duty is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may be talk with someone who is ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, sometimes we encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Now, paragraph 2. If we cannot or would not rather have this, we search our acquaintance or a close mouth, understanding friend. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist would be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such of our story will tell that we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. So in these 3 paragraphs, as they were originally written, give me one second. I have a puppy downstairs that I don't know if, okay, she's being good. Um, when the big book was written, there was no sponsors to go to. Bill was giving suggestions as whom to do the step with, but we think it's important that we find one person who has done the work as outlined in the big book. Being knowledgeable as in our ability to be honest with ourselves, they can be objective and help point out our shortcomings. So continue on page 75, paragraph 1. And paragraph 3. So paragraph 1, when we decide who is to hear our stories, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner that what we are about to do and why we have to do it. We should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most of the people approach it this way will be glad to help, but they will be honored by our confidence. And then it goes to paragraph 3, which says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we can turn the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything or if we are building an ark of which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimmed on the cement put into the foundation, or have we tried to make mortar without sand? Okay, so continuing in our workshop book here, it says this is the most magical page in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page 75. It's the beginning of a whole deal. It is sandwiched in between step 5 and 6 as a gift from God. There are only 2 things you can do with the gift. You can take it and make it yours and be eternally grateful, or you can throw it away for what I believe to be the greatest gift God gave to humanity. It is right there on page 75. There are 10 promises on page 75. It states we are preparing an ark for which we will walk a free person. I am free today by the definition of the book, which says freedom is doing what I have to do because I want to do it. There isn't anything in this world I have to do if I don't want to do it, as long as I'm willing to pay the price. The big book goes on and says, the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. It goes on to say all the fears will fall from us. You may not realize this until sometime later in your sobriety, but when you get up the courage to do something you used to be terrified to do, then you will find that the fear has been removed from you. It continues to say on the page, you'll begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. You'll begin to feel that we're on a broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. My sponsor says you will have brushed the face of God and establish a conscious contact with a power greater than yourself. It is all right there on page 75, along with 5 more promises. For God's sake, hurry on, lest the test comes before you are ready. While giving your 5th step to your sponsor, you'll be making a list of your character defects, and as you and your sponsor have analyzed and discussed them. Now, there's the assignment to read chapters 6 and 7 in the 12th step and the 12 traditions. Be prepared to discuss the material willingness and humility. It might be helpful to look up these words. And there's a quote at the bottom of this page. It says, yesterday is lost and gone forever, while tomorrow is but a guess. What is real, what is here and now, and what is here and now is all that we possess. Stay awake and aware in the present moment. Another word for that is one day at a time. So that wraps up week 14, the into action, step 5. Now, step 5, that's when we sit down with our sponsor and we go over step 4. Now we're going to talk about step 6 and 7 here. So we're going to just kind of go right into that. And I'll see how much time we have. I think we've only been talking for about 15 minutes. This should take up the rest of the hour. So I guess we'll just dive right into this. So into action, step 6 and 7. So on page 76, paragraph 1. And let me get to that page here. Oh, they had my little bookmark on there, my step 3 and step 7 little notebook or bookmark. If we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized the willingness as human or as being indispensable. We are now ready to let God remove from us the things that we have admitted which are objectionable. He can now take them all. Everyone, if we still cling to something, we will not let it go. We will ask God to help keep us willing. So that's all of step 6. You'll notice that he didn't mention defects of character in there at all. What he did mention is those things which we have admitted that are objectionable. So now surely in taking steps 4 and 5, we saw resentments, fears, harms done to other people. When we saw those things stemmed from our basic character defects of selfishness, self-seeking, dishonesty, frightened, and inconsiderate character. And when we could see those things did to us that caused us to do the things that hurt other people and cause them to retaliate us and block us from God, then we surely know now that those things have become objectionable. If they aren't, then the book, recognizing that self cannot overcome self, says we ask God to help us be willing to have those things removed. So let's face it, sometimes during step 6, even though we have seen those old defects of character or what they're doing to us, sometimes we don't want to let them loose for a couple of reasons. Number 1, some of them seem fun and stimulating. Number 2, we don't know what life is going to be like without them. I went to my sponsor and said, if I have God remove all my character defects, I won't have any personalities left. And he said, you're just about 100% correct. But he said, what you don't understand is that God takes those away and replaces them with something better. So by something better, it'll be something you've never had before, and you're going to have a lot better of a life by doing so. But I'm afraid sometimes we human beings would rather sit in today's pain than take a chance of changing for the future because we don't know what it's going to be. And we understand today's pain. Yeah, well, I know for myself too, change is uncomfortable. So even if it's a painful and whatever situation with any habits or any place I'm in, sometimes I'd rather just stay in that than take a risk with the unknown, because that's one of my fears. I don't like the unknown. So back to the book. My mind is nothing more than a set of mental habits. Throughout my life, those habits have been ingrained in my head. And then it's an automatic thing for me to react with fear. It's an automatic for me to react selfishly. It's automatic for me to react dishonestly. It's automatic for me to be inconsiderate of other people. I don't know how life will be if I'm reacting differently. How can I now act different? I've been that way before, but I've forgotten how. Sometimes, there it is, fear stops us from reacting differently if we're not ready. And if the reactions are not objectable by now, the only thing we need to do is ask God to help us to get rid of these things. So slowly, as God takes one away and I practice the other, my character changes. On the contrary, action is required. Actions against my will. Actions contrary to the way I have always lived my life. So, step 6, it's a very difficult step to do if you want to change. And step 6 says, don't do what you want to do, because if you feed into the action of your old patterns and your old character, then then they're going to grow and grow. But if you feed into actions into your new thought patterns, your new character, the old patterns and character will die in your mind. And it is very, very hard. Don't just do what you want to do. We can only do that with God's help. Even though it's unapproved AA literature, I love David Goggins. He helped me listening to him speak when I first got sober. One of his main mantras, he's a retired military he's just a crazy guy. He does like ultra marathons. The guy's just insane, but what he does with his body, and he says he wakes up every day and does stuff he doesn't like to do, and that makes him who he is today. And I mean, it goes hand in hand with this, and I just love that mentality, and that's helped me grow, because honestly, I pretty much everything I do on a daily basis I don't really like doing, but it's giving me a good life that I'm more free from myself and free from the addiction of alcohol. Um, where like, if I'm doing what I like to do, I would be getting blackout drunk every day. What kind of a life is that? You know what I mean? So like every day I don't want, to start, I didn't want to pray. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't want to be nice to people who were not nice to me. Just those little things, but over time they grow and they become like this new character because I used to not be nice. I used to be mean. If somebody wronged me, I was going to wrong you one more. And that was my character. So when it's saying, it is very, very hard. We can't just do what we want to do because what I want to do is not God's will. I can tell you that. And my life was not going well, and it was very unmanageable. So I relate a lot with this, and it is very difficult. Nobody said that picking up this book and getting sober was easy, or that you would like it. So, read page 76, paragraph 2. When we are ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good or bad. I pray that you now remove me from every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go from here. Do your bidding. Amen. I love that. Okay, so we've completed step 7. And Bill didn't even mention shortcomings. Bill uses shortcomings and defects interchangeably. So I found that my character defects and shortcomings in step 4, when we talked about them to another human being in step 5 and became ready to turn loose of them in step 6. I asked God to remove them in step 7. So now I've completed step 6 and step 7. But if I'm not careful, I'll fall into a trap. We tend to feel after step 6 and 7 that God is going to teach in and to reach in and pluck these defects of character and just make us pure as the driven snow. That is simply not true. We turn to God and hand them over and say, here you go. Give me the $29.95 special and everything will be all right. No, these were not the steps God took. God doesn't need these steps. He's okay already. God doesn't reach into my head and remove these character defects like leaving another hole in my head. God replaces them with the opposite. If we want God to take away my selfishness, he's going to start with practice being unselfish with God's help and all the willingness, and I can muster through prayer. Slowly over time, an old habit will die and it will be replaced with a new habit. Oh my gosh, I relate with that so much. Last time I prayed for patience, I was in rehab because I had been there 5 times in that year. Uh, and I was just like, I didn't want to be there. And it was, I was still very self-absorbed. And I was like, I just wish God, give me more patience for this. And, very shortly after I moved into an Oxford house, which is sober living, and I was there for 11 months. That's the last time I prayed for patience, but that's exactly what it is. So I'm going to pray for patience or selflessness. And God's going to replace it with things that are you're going to have to practice. So slowly, sometimes very slowly, over a period of time, an old habit will die, and it'll be replaced with a new habit, and that is very true. If I'm going to let God take away dishonesty, then I'm going to have to try in every given situation to be honest with God's help and all the willingness I can muster through prayer. Now, that's hard for me to do. It's alien to my nature, but when God helps me by removing these character defects and I practice the opposite, slowly the old habit dies and it's replaced with the new. And sometimes we wind down on step 6 and 7, maybe because the big book only has 2 paragraphs on these steps. However, we begin to see that steps 6 and 7 are the real tools in change in the program. Steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are seeing the problem and the solution and making the decision and the inventory. And once we've done all that and see these things and talk them over with another person, the first 5 steps prepare us for these 2 great tools that we're about to apply to our daily lives. And this is in bold. Our future life is really based on how we apply these steps. God doesn't take these steps. He doesn't need to. But we need to take these steps to change. And it's very difficult steps to work at first. Easy to understand, but they are hard. The big book says simple, but not easy. Our mind is a set of mental habits that we are used to all of our lives. We have developed old patterns, and we got into these mental habits that we worked on them for years to get sick. We didn't get sick overnight. So we're going to have to work the same way to make these changes. It is with this use and application of these tools, these 2 tools, step 6 and 7, that we can change. So step 7 can be it can be a hard tool to use when you don't want to do When you don't do what you naturally want to do and make yourself do what you naturally don't want to do, pretty soon your old ideas will begin to fade and a new set of motives will begin to determine your mind. That was wild to read. When we begin to do the things we naturally don't want to do, we begin to see the good results from doing those things. So those things will become a part of our personality, and the old things will become less important, and the new part will become your new way of life. It's just a matter of working against yourself. Ooh, yes. Freedom from the bondage of self. There was a student years ago in the big book who said that saving your life meant daily dying to self. I have no idea what the big book is. But you have to die somewhere in your life so that you can live somewhere new. Only, are they talking about the Bible? I don't know. Only we can do that job on a daily basis, and that's what steps 6 and 7 are. Dying or daily dying somewhere so we can live somewhere new. And we have to do that. And then it says the leader will discuss willingness and humility with the group so that we can understand the context. So let's see what all this means. This is a program of perpetual nature and perpetuity. And we get help and we can't keep it unless we give it away. In fact, the freedom from bondage of self, the selfishness and self-centeredness we suffer from, which is the cause of our problems today, is only relieved through and by helping others. The program, the steps themselves, and the practice for this very big job, they train us to help others and help and get others trained, to train others to help others. And all of us get out of ourselves where we can see the truth. The illness, the spiritual malady, is a separation from a God conscious, which we suffer. This place is also known as ego, but it's simply a separation from God's love. This is the power that we lack, although there is and has been there all along. We've just merely lacked a connectivity to it and a relationship with it. In this place, we are most fearful because we have to be the most self-reliant, and it's reliance that we know in our hearts that we cannot live up to. Our history shows plainly for all to see that our self-reliance had failed us dreadfully. So we know our own shortcomings and failures, and we know that we can't survive on our own resources, yet ego insists on not getting the help we need from God to survive. It would rather see you die a miserable death than to admit failure and accept assistance because it would feel that it could lose its position and significance, a status that wrongly thinks would lessen its inherent sense of insecurity. All of our thoughts, feelings, and actions are based on this one premise, that our egos might feel insignificant and therefore insecure. This is the thinking that precedes our actions, and the premise behind our character defects, that we should never fall short, that we should always win, that we can never be seen as human, typical, or average. The ego wants us to be above average and special in the eyes of others. This is pride, which is one of the 7 deadly sins. The protector of the ego. The pride is like the ego's armor. Whenever the ego is attacked with a weapon of insecurity, it is pride that reacts as armor usually does, with a chilling clang that sets emotion through emotion, a pre-learned reaction. This program will teach us that humility is a pathway to peace, and that if you think what we have will save you isn't so at all, wait, I cannot talk today. This program will teach us that humility is a pathway to peace, and that all you think that what will save you isn't so at all. It hasn't worked so far. And good honest look at your entire life through fearlessness and thoroughness, the inventory will prove that to you. You can come to find that your life isn't working because your reaction and external and internal stimuli has been the exact opposite of what would and will work for you. So true. In step 6 and 7, we'll learn how to change everything in our lives by changing ourselves. Wouldn't that be miserable if we had to change everybody to get what we needed in life? It's not possible. It's just not possible. How miserable. But it is comforting to know that we can change ourselves. I love that. The serenity prayer. You read it a lot, but sometimes I'll just brush over the concept. Like we can only change ourselves, and that is comforting. So yet we do have a way out that has worked for thousands of people who are once in the same position of despair that we are in right now, and they're free people. Hello, and they're at peace, living in the sunlight of the spirit. That's why we are here to do this workshop, because it's true. Everything that they say in this book is true, and it worked for me, and it can work for you. That should be a poem. Okay, so there's some little assignments here. It still says on the next page in the workbook, so there's like a little assignment break, but it still continues into week 15 with some more material here. So a lot of this is like the Joe and Charlie transcript, so this may be repetitive, but we do have some time. So we do have about 30 minutes. So now on page 151. So now that we've done step 4 and 5 according to the big book, we've done a lot of work and we're probably tired and need a little rest. This book is going to give us a little rest stop. So on the big book on page 75, it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Joe and Charlie said in their transcript. Now, he didn't say 72 days. They might mean for us to get on with this thing between steps 3 and 4 at once. Like we said, we make that decision. It'll have little or no effect at step 3 if at once followed by a rigorous course of our inventory. But now we get into an hour's rest here, but that is all. So on the big book on page 64 in line 1, it says, through our decision of step 3, which was vital and a crucial step, it could have little or permanent effects unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. That's what I just said. So page 75 continues, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And Joe and Charlie say, we don't know him yet, but we know him better. So continuing on page 75, taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to page 59, which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, which ask if we've omitted anything. If we are building an ark through which we can walk a free man at last, is our work solid? Are the stones properly in place? Or have we skimmed on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without stands? Are we being alcoholics and taking the easy way out and doing things our way? That's what it's asking. And essentially when I did my first 4 steps, that is exactly what happened. I skimmed, was not thorough. I didn't do this like the book. What happened? I drank because I cannot run my life. And it is unmanageable when I run my life. So back to Joe and Charlie. They said, once again, we were referring to the wonderful effect of the spiritual structure, the personality change which we're building. So we got step 1, willingness was the foundation. 2, believing was the cornerstone. 3 is the arch that which we pass to freedom, and it is the keystone. So now I have 2 more stones in place. We got step 4 and step 5. So if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we can look at step 6. We have emphasized the willingness as being indispensable. We are now ready to have God remove us the things at which we had admitted were objectionable. Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let it go, and we ask God to help us be willing. So Joe and Charlie say, if you notice that he says, he didn't say a thing about the defects of character, did he? He didn't say those things that we admitted that were objectionable. Now, surely in step 4 and 5, when we looked out to the 4th and 5th columns, we saw that the old selfishness, dishonored, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate character that we had become, when we saw those, what were the cause of the things to hurt people that they did in turn to retaliate, and in turn we resented and we were afraid and filled up with guilt and remorse that causes us to drink, then those things in the 4th and 5th steps have now become objectionable to us. Are we ready to turn them loose? If we are, through step 6, the book recognizes that self cannot overcome self, because it says if we're not ready to ask God to be willing to turn these things loose. So now when you think we would see things as they do to us more than be willing, but sometimes we're not. So we can be human beings, and we're funny people too, because sometimes we'd rather sit in today's pain and suffering because we've learned how to take care of that and become accustomed to it. And we'd rather be in today's pain and suffering than take a chance on changing the future because we don't know what it will bring. That is what I said at the beginning of this week. That is on my fears inventory. I do not like the unknown. I hate surprises because I am a control freak alcoholic and I want to run the show. But if I run the show, you clearly could see what my life of a dumpster fire was becoming. And that's what I was accustomed to. We live in a lie, which is also the insanity in the book, the delusion, all these words that Bill used in the book. We are insane. Our normal is a lie. So the circumstances of a dumpster fire of life that we're living in We become accustomed to because we think it's normal, because we're insane. So we would rather sit in that than take a chance on the future because we don't know. That is where this program saves our life. So moving on. I'm all over the place today. Been sitting inside too long this week with school. Okay. So if I have to get rid of my selfishness and unselfishness, wait, if I have to get rid of my selfishness and become unselfish, then how am I going to get what I want in the future? That's such an alcoholic thing to say. If I'm going to get rid of my dishonesty and start operating honestly, then how the heck am I going to make a living? I don't know how being honest, like when I get there, if I'm going to have to start getting rid of my self-seeking and frightened character and start operating on courage, that scares the hell out of me. I don't know nothing about that. If I'm going to start considering other people and their needs and their wants, then who's going to take care of me? So sometimes we'd rather sit in today's pain than take a chance on changing the future. Baker would recognize that and said, if you're not ready, on page 76, we ask God to help us be willing. Same thing with resentments. Same thing with everything else. If we're not ready, we ask God to help because we can't do this alone. Joe and Charlie say that God's help, we become willing with steps 3 through 6. So when we're ready, we say something like this, and this is a 7-step prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove me from every single defect of character. Joe and Charlie, whoop, whoop, we're at step 7 now, and it said shortcomings, but here he calls it defects of character. See what he's done to us? He's confused the heck out of us, didn't he? So it says, I pray that you now remove me of every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I come out of here to do your bidding. Amen. And then we've completed step 7. So are you ready to have God remove them, the defects of character? Are you ready to go through step 6? Have you humbly asked him to take them away? If you have, you've done step 7. So I hope you don't make the mistake I did and assume that now I'm ready and God being all powerful, that I've got to do is turn it to God and say, okay, here I am, warts and all. Does that mean I give you the $29.95 special and I'll never have to worry about the stuff again? Found out it doesn't work that way. God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. I simply do not have the power to remove a character defect. Only God does. Jen touched on this if we watched last video last week in our last study, where she said the miracle does happen in step 7, but it is simply not true that everything is just completely removed and it just goes away. That's not what they're saying here. That that God has to take away these defects. So God will not do it for me of what I can do for myself. And what I can do for myself is find the opposite of that character defect. So with God's help and all the willpower I can muster in every situation that comes up is try to practice the opposite. Like we were saying, everything we don't like to do is what we need to do. What I like to do is not God's will. Joe and Charlie, because you see, God can't take away my selfishness and leave another hole in my head. It's going to have to be replaced with the opposite, which is unselfishness. And when I got here, my mind was set on mental habits ingrained in 38, 39, 40 years of living. The habitual thing for me was to react selfishly. The only way to break a habit is work against yourself. Oof. Ooh. That is a hard competitor. If I'm to ask God to take away the selfishness and I start practicing unselfishness, then slowly the old habit dies and a new habit takes its place. Over a period of years, I've become an unselfish human being, and I'm not what I was when I first got here. Absolutely. Absolutely. If I want God to take away dishonesty, then I must do my part, which is to practice honesty in every situation that comes up, and that's hard for me to do. It is so alien to my nature that I can't practice honesty without God's help. But with God's power and all the willpower I can muster, I can force myself to be honest and slow the idea, and it'll die and a new one will take its place. The habitual thing for me today is to react in any situation with honesty. I like that. That is something we control, is our honesty. So if we want God to take away fear, then we've got to kick myself in the butt and practice courage. If I want him to take away in consideration, then I must start considering other people of their needs and their wants. And slowly the old ideas and dies and a new one takes place. In the big book, on page 63, paragraph 1, we were reborn. Joe and Charlie. I'm not what I used to be. I am not completely unselfish. I never will be. I am not always completely honest. Sometimes I'm afraid, and other times I am inconsiderate. But the majority of my time, I am unselfish, and I'm an honest human being with courage, considering other people first. You know, I think you and I are the luckiest people in the world, and we have the opportunity through these little steps here, 6 and 7, to live 2 lifetimes in 1 lifetime. Many people out there are sick, and most of them are going to go to their grave sick, not even knowing that they're sick. And we only know that we're sick because we know what's wrong with us, and we found it in the steps 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. We can do something about it, and we can change it and become entirely different human beings. That is the beauty of this program, guys. For anybody that's watching this, that just brought a tear to my eye. I didn't know I was sick until I became an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic for a long time, but I didn't want to admit it. I thought it was the biggest curse. And I can truly say that today, that being an alcoholic is the biggest blessing because of what he said right here. We are the luckiest people in the world because we have these steps to live 2 lifetimes in 1. Most sick people out there are going to their graves sick, not knowing they're sick. If I had not developed the physical allergy and the mental obsession and this manifestation of this spiritual malady, um, I remember the life before being an active addiction. If I never had that happen to me, I truly believe I would have gone to the grave sick because I was never comfortable in my own skin. I was a selfish, self-centered piece of shit person. I don't know how, like it said, we didn't get sick overnight. We developed these habits. But because of this program, I was able to look at myself, and with the help of God, I've been able to live 2 lifetimes in 1, and I am so grateful. And I'm sorry I cried, but like that is what this program will do for people. And if you don't believe it now, I can tell you, I know this program works because it's worked in my life. I don't believe it anymore. I know that it is true. So, moving on. Uh, most people don't get this opportunity, so now be careful. For God's sake, be careful, because if you really accept this as the correct thing and that what that means for you on day 1, you're responsible for what you are. And I can't blame it on Barbara any longer. I can't blame it on mom and dad. I can't blame it on God. I can't blame it on society. If I say selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightening, and inconsiderate, it's going to be because that's the way I want to be. And I no longer have the luxury of blaming it on others because I want it to be that way. So you know what I found? I found that if you become unselfish, people start to like you a little better than they did before. I found out when you start becoming honest, well, you feel better about yourself, and that's the way you build self-esteem, is to do the right thing for a change. And when I found out I practice courage and operate on courage instead of fear, I do the things that make me feel better and quit doing the things that made me feel so bad. And I found out there's pleasure in considering other people first and giving others before you take for yourself. And I didn't know that. How the hell could I know that? Because I'd never been that way before. So this thing really amazes me. And what happens to me, and the simplicity of the thing, is if we just do what the book says. So, Joe, there's always a paradox in AA. If you give an idea to what a paradox is, how many of you ever call your sponsor so you could listen? Paradox. We always call them so we could talk, right? Well, that's a paradox. So the paradox here in these 2 steps is what they use. So we got the doctor's opinion and the first 4 chapters to do step 1 and 2. 3.5 pages for step 3. There's 8 pages for step 4, 4 pages for step 5, and a whole chapter devoted to working with others. So the paragraph is that 2 of the biggest steps of the alcoholics are in 2 little paragraphs for step 6 and 7. These are the tools for change. These are the tools for acceptance. A lot of people talk about just running around accepting things. I accept this, I accept that, I can't do that. So acceptance comes after action. Acceptance comes after the actions of 6 and 7. So there's a story in the other book, the Bible, about this guy named Judas. And Judas could not accept what he had done, which was betrayal. And what did he do? He killed himself. So that's the importance of acceptance. You can't accept anything unless you take some actions. And he didn't do step 6 and 7. They didn't have them. So there's another story in the other book, the Bible. Take this or leave it if you will, if you're not religious, whatever. But there's Saul. He was riding on his donkey on the way to Damascus. The big bolt of lightning came down and knocked him off his ass. On his ass. Oh, that's funny. That's the way I read it. He gets up and dusts himself off. And this big voice came out of the sky and said, Saul, can we talk? And he said, yeah, we can talk. What do you want to talk about? Well, we had to get his attention, didn't he? Maybe alcoholism has to get our attention. Saul, you've been a very selfish individual and you've harmed a lot of people and you're very resentful and angry. Harmed a lot of people with those attitudes. You want to quit doing that? And Saul asked, well, how do I quit doing that? Well, to do these things, it said if you want to do that, you'll have to make a change. And when you do the change, we'll call you Paul. So he did those things and became Paul. But we know Paul was one of the greatest writers the world has ever known. The Corinthians from the town of Corinth, Greece. They asked Paul one day, Paul, what is the secret to living? And Paul answered, the secret to living is a daily dying. I love that. The old Saul had to die so that the new Paul could become alive. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Since this isn't a religious program, I don't want to bring church into this, but we're doing a series on David, and David's father-in-law was actually Saul. So the story of David is excellent. So by the time I got to step 6 and 7, I could see that I'd become a result of the previous steps, which I didn't like, and I had to become a little doubt crept in my mind. Can God really change me from what I had become for what he intends for me to be? And I had to reaffirm and think about that idea of God on page 53. He said, God either is or he isn't. He either can or he can't. What was our choice to be? And I chose to believe that he could, the tools of change. People say this in the program all the time. Is God everything or is he nothing? So 2 of the big steps in the Alcoholics, this is the 2 of the biggest steps in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's see how many more pages. We only have 2 more pages. Perfect timing. So just before the break, I want Joe to tell you one little story about buying some salad to show you before practicing this thing. A few years ago, I went in a grocery store to buy some salad and came out with some stuff to fix for the salad. And that night I was having steak. I went in there and bought all this stuff and came up to the register and I was going to pay and give this lady $10. And she took the $10 and stood right there and counted out the change for 20. And I watched her do it. And I picked up that money and put it in my pocket. And I went out to the car and said, oh, well, you got a big dummy you sold out for $10. I thought it was worth more than that. And I'm glad it wasn't less than that. So I took the money back in there and I told the lady, I'm a member of a fellowship that requires me to be honest, and you gave me too much money. And I want to give you these $10 back. And she said, I never heard of a fellowship like that. Well, I hadn't until a few years ago either. So here's your $10. The whole point of the story is I went out with the $10, and believe me, I don't need $10. I don't need $10. And I'm walking out and I felt that big squeaky at the door. And I mean when I don't say I need $10, and I felt, or I keep rereading the same sentence. I went back in there and gave her the $10. And I walked out and I felt good again. I did the right thing. So if you practice that enough times, next time she gets changed for 20, you do it right, and you do it right then and there. You don't even go out the door. And that's what we're talking about when we change, and only we can do it. We can slay ourselves with God's help and become different human beings. So if you want to stay dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, it must be because you want to. Say that. We have completed our first 7 steps, knowing that we're fully going to be working on step 6, 7 for the rest of our lives, really trying to change the opportunity that comes up. So now we've read in the big book where we were spiritually sick, mentally sick, physically sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. We begin to look at those things and begin to realize that human beings are born to live in 3 dimensions of life. If God dwells within each one of us, we are going to have to live with God, whether we like it or not. That is aside the point. So there's a spiritual dimension. The only question is, do we live with him in harmony or disharmony? If I know anyone that ever got more disharmony with God then I don't know anybody that has been in more disharmony with God than we alcoholics have. We should have what we call the mental dimension. We've got a mind. Sometimes we act like we don't, but we have to live with our mind, whether we like it or not. And that's beside the point, because we don't have a choice. And again, we live there with our mind. And do we live there with harmony or disharmony? I don't know of any group of people that have got more fouled up in their heads than we alcoholics. For years, we thought the physical dimension was body only. Today, we realize the physical dimension is the world and everything in it. Alcoholics don't have a place else to live except here on earth, and we don't have a choice in the matter whether we like it or not, because the only question is, do we live on earth with our fellow man in harmony or disharmony? And I don't know any group of people who ever got more fouled up in a relationship with the world and everybody in it than us alcoholics. So we were sick spiritually, mentally, and physically. And the book talks about a design for living, and it looks and seems to us that these steps are designed in a manner to put us back together, that we'll all live in a three-dimensional life as God intended for us to be in the first place. So steps 1 and 2, we got right with the spirit because we were powerless and we needed the power. Step 3, we decided to go after that power. We made that decision that God was going to be the director. He was the father, we're the children. He's the employer, we're the employee. We work for him. Most of us, that's the first time we've had the relationship with God in a long, 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 long time. And we got right in the relationships in steps 1, 2, and 3. And that removes self-will. So let's look into our own minds for steps 4 and 5, where we found the things that block us from God, blocks us from our fellow man, creates resentment and fear and guilt, etc. And in step 6 and 7, we began to work on those things that block us off. So we began to get right in our minds through steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. That removes just enough will to begin to look at our relationship with the world and everybody in it. So steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, we got rid of these resentments. We got rid of the fears to the level of God intended them to be. And we hadn't really done anything but the storeroom back there that's filled with guilt and shame and remorse and the harms I've done in the past. So if we want to get right in the physical dimension, our relationship with the world and everybody in it, it has long been known that the way you do that is to make restitution for the things we have done. So next week, we will continue on into action. Week 17, we will also do that. I am just fast forwarding to see what we have left for our study together. Where was the week 18? Oh, really short. Okay, so 16, 17, 18, the next 3 weeks are going to be on into action. And then the final week, which is week 19, we'll be working with others, just relatively short. And then we'll be done with this study. I loved going over this into action today, because we had been working on like how the program works for quite some time. Just give me 1 second here. I'm trying to get organized for next week. So we got that, and we got that. Okay. Yeah. The action part of this program is something that is, we have to work on daily. All we have as alcoholics is a daily reprieve from this disease. So whether, and someone said this to me the other day who was having a hard time, and I was being a little hard on them. They were saying, just because I have almost 4 years doesn't mean I'm immune to the risk of losing what we have got this far in this program. And we maintain that, and we're going to learn how to do that in the next couple of steps with what we need to do on a daily basis and how we put all this work we've done into action. Because like we said, the first 3 steps is we had a lack of power. And there's a spiritual part of that where we make the decision to turn our lives over to the care of God as we understand him. And we do our thorough house cleaning. But like it said in the beginning, those first 3 steps have little or no effect unless at once followed by taking that deep look at ourselves with step 4. Well, it's saying we get an hour after our step 4, or telling someone our step 4. We get 1 hour. We get a 1 hour break to digest that. And now we need to go into action. So into action is every day. That's why you'll always hear further on, we have to do a 10-step. We have to do this. We have to do all this stuff every day. Sometimes into action is going back to previous steps. I have to go back to step 3 every day, sometimes multiple times a day, because what we're talking about in this into action is In steps 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God or our higher power as we understood him. When we go into action now and we're working with other people, and we can only keep what we have by working with other people and doing the opposite of our defects, where I'm very self-centered, self-seeking, all these things. I'm going to start practicing honesty, not being selfish, caring about other people. I'm going to be doing all these opposite things of what I am. So I've turned my will over. Doing these things is stuff I don't want to do when I first get in here. It doesn't matter if you don't want to do them. We have to do them. This is vital. And we learn that, like they said in here, when you start practicing things like being nice to people instead of being so selfish, the world reacts in a different way and people seem to like us a little better, which in turn helps us like them a little better. It's like that circle, like what goes around comes around. It does, because I say it all the time. I prayed for friends, I prayed for my family. I wanted all this stuff before I got in here, but I was not a good friend. I was not a good family member. I was not even letting God run my life. How am I going to ask to have these things and resent the world for me not having them when I myself am not being that person to other people? And honestly, like I said, I had to do sober living. It was necessary at the time in my recovery. I did not want to live with other women. So any newcomers in here that have to do sober living, do all this crap, the rehabs, having roommate, all this crap that I didn't want to do because I was very prideful. And I was also just very, very wrapped up in Jessica. And all those things that I did eventually, when I made that decision to turn my will over to God, I decided that I didn't want to be a part of the chaos anymore, that I wanted to be a message of hope, because I knew that something in me, when I made that decision, and especially in step 2, when I came to believe that a power would restore me, I had hope in those steps that I can make it through this and be well and recover. And I started seeing that in my life, and I knew that I was a message of hope, and I knew I would be, because God was doing these promises in my life that I didn't deserve. And we have that choice to continue being a part of this chaos, where it says, like, if you still have, I don't know where we read it, where it said, uh it was basically saying, if we aren't rid of these things, these defects, and we're not asking God to remove them, that like we don't want them, or we want to keep them. So that's true, that we have to start doing these things we don't want to do, and eventually it'll give us a better life. Like I started that, like I wanted to be that message of hope. There were other new girls in there that didn't want to be there, and they were miserable and younger than me. And I remember being like that 10 years ago, you know what I mean? And I just wanted to be that friend to those girls. And in turn, they started being friends to me. Like I started getting like a nice card on like my birthday, or stuff that no one would ever have wrote me a nice card when in my drinking, like, or ever. Like I never got a nice birthday card from a friend, and I got multiple, and I also got multiple nice cards on my 1-year anniversary. I don't know why I'm so weepy today. I'm just so grateful. Truly. It's just those little things, and it's just because, if we make those changes in ourselves, that's the only thing we can control. I can't control getting friends and keeping friends. All I can control is being a good friend to somebody else, and, be that person that I wish I had in my life. And that's been basically the mantra I've lived in this program, and it is all a course of action. And everything that I did not want to do has helped me get where I am today. Just if analogies work great. If you don't want to go to the gym, you go to the gym every day, and eventually you're healthier, you lose weight, you gain muscle, and it gives you a new body that helps carry you to do better things. Whereas if we don't get up and work out, and we don't lose that fat and that weight, and we sit there, we can't do these things, and we feel disgusted with ourselves. So it's like, yes, in that moment, you don't want to go to the gym, and you don't want to do it every fucking day. But you have to. And then the thing is, when you get the muscle and feel fit, and you look good for once, it's use it or lose it. So if we don't continue to go to the gym, we'll continue to go back into our old ways, gain weight and feel, shitty. So it's the same thing with this program. If we do not continue this action, all we have is a daily reprieve. So that is enough of my rant. This was a wonderful week. Even if I'm just doing this by myself, this helps me. So, I look forward to our next couple of weeks here, and thank you for letting me share.